Welcome, guys. Congratulations on the movie.
Thank you.
Steven, let's start with you. It's very rare that a project is successful as a novel, as a play, and as a movie. What do you kind of think is the bones of this story that makes every iteration possible?
Well, you know, the bones of the story is basically a love story.
Right.
You know, that makes it a little bit universal. You know, it was that way in the book, and certainly was that way on the boards on the West End. And that's what we tried to do in our adaptation of War Horse, was to really create a bonding story where this, where Joey basically circumvents the emotional globe of the Great War and gets very not only connected with the people who are caring for Joey, but more importantly, Joey has a way of bringing people together, especially people from both sides of the war.
Right.
And that was very evident in the play.
Right. And Kathy, when you sort of discovered the project, what do you think was so right for Steven about this project?
Well, I mean, the first thing I thought about was how right it was for the audience. I was really responding to the fact that there was such a wide range of people responding, you know, for ages from 8 to 80, really. There were families going to the play. And I think that's what struck me. And when I told Steven about it, he just instantly responded to the simplicity of the storyline. I mean, a boy that goes in to World War I to find his horse immediately conjures up a very powerful emotional response.
Okay, so have some questions from the floor. Yeah, we've got front row there. Yeah.
Hi, Steven and Kathy. As a young person, this film really moved me and helped me to understand more about the First World War. What do you think it is about film watching in general that will help to educate and help children learn?
Well, you know, children learn, as we know, exponentially from media today. And I think we feel responsible when we make a movie that even touches on historical fact, that there has to be, you know, more than a kernel of truth in the history of, especially the First World War. So we did a lot of research beyond what you may perceive to be the story that you saw in War Horse. We did a lot of research, and the thing that really struck me in the research I did were just the vast number of casualties among the horses, not just the men who died on the American, British, French, and German side, but just the fact that this was the death knell of the horse. This was the end of the horse as an implement of warfare. And it was an era, and I think kids would be interested in this, where the machine, the tank, the airplane, chemical warfare, it all kind of converged on the First World War, almost like an experimental war that was the war to end all wars. At least that's what they thought.
Well, you know, it's interesting you should say that, because Richard Curtis, our screenwriter, last night he was saying that his son got in the car and the first thing he said was, you know, I hope there's never another war. He was so moved by the movie. And I think, you know, that's the power of imagery in motion pictures, is that you have an opportunity to put pictures to some of the things that you learn. And it has a tremendous power in how it communicates the horrors of war.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Question for both really. In your research in the development of the film, did you find yourself drawing more from either the book or the play, or one in particular, or?
I drew more from Richard Curtis' script. I mean, Richard wrote a brilliant screenplay. I mean, there's 2 screenwriters credited. Lee Hall wrote a wonderful first draft, and Richard came in, and he was my primary writer throughout the entire process of pre-production and right through production of the picture. And I was very drawn to the way Richard saw the story. You know, a little bit more like the book, Richard did not want Albert to come back into the movie until very late, so we have a hiatus from our central character. You know, and we don't even see Albert until the 3rd act. And that was something that Richard brought into the equation.
Yeah, and I do think it's very interesting, though, that the central idea of the story exists in literature, and then on the stage, and then as a film. And each one is so different, and yet we're all borrowing from what Michael Morpurgo created.
Yeah. This is Michael Morpurgo's baby.
Hi.
Asim Language from Croatia. First of all, congratulations on the movie, which is quite different from the dominant movies we get from Hollywood today. And I have a question. You started in period when filmmaking was still very important in Hollywood. And what is your comment on Hollywood today? Today Hollywood looks like Wall Street of world's culture or something like that.
Well, it might look that way if you read the papers. It's not that way when you're in Hollywood making movies. The creative process, the people who are giving everything they have to express a story, to tell a story to you, the creative process is just as stimulating and just as, I guess, sharing. It's a very collaborative process. And I know it might seem that way because so much ink is spilled and media is obsessed with business and numbers and studios and that sort of thing. The filmmakers don't feel that way. We just go off and we tell our stories, and it's the same torture that we endure is the same torture that our forefathers endured making movies in the golden era of Hollywood, you know. So from my perspective, it's no different than I'm sure it was for the men and women who I admire so much who made the earliest movies.
There, and then
Mr. Spielberg, scarcely as the British landscape looks so good on film. I wonder what was your initial reaction to both the Devon and the Castle Combe locations?
Oh, Castle Combe it looks like Hollywood built it, you know. It doesn't look real, but it's beautiful. It's very authentic and very old. The Devon location has some of the most natural wonders in all of England. With the tours, they're so beautiful. Those, the tours that are built up in a very most unusual way. I've only seen something like this one other time, and that was in New Zealand, where there are also tours in large areas, kind of high desert. But there's nothing like the landscapes of Devon. We couldn't believe it. And you know, the original script didn't have the budget that allowed us to go to Devon. And we stretched the budget a bit to afford to go there, and it was worth every penny.
Kathy, how are you with the weather? Do you have luck with the weather?
You know, it was pretty extraordinary because everyone had told us that when you get down into Devon and Cornwall, you run the risk that it could be raining quite a bit, and that's partly why it's so beautiful. But we had these extraordinary days with, we had wonderful sunny skies, but we also had the fog come in and a lot of texture to the landscape. And the amazing thing is that farmhouse, when we left, literally a week later, it rained every day so hard that entire area flooded. So we were blessed in some way. I think somebody was looking out for us.
A question I'm asked quite often is how much people love the digital skies that we obviously painted.
It's the end of the movie, yeah.
All through the movie, and there's not a single sky that we put in through special effects. The skies you see in the movie are the skies that we experienced. The sunsets you have in the movie are the sunsets that we experienced.
I don't think I've been on a movie where you were shooting and you look around and suddenly the whole crew stops working and they're just staring out at the landscape, because that sunset at the end of the movie, I have to give huge credit to Steven, because it isn't exactly the way the ending was written until that sunset appeared, and Steven instantly knew how he was going to frame the end of the movie.
But it took 3 days to shoot it because I had this idea based on the spectacular sunset, how to do it with the fence posts and everything. And then all of a sudden I only got about 5 shots because the sun goes out awfully fast in Devon. And so we had to come back again and again to get matching skies to make that whole sequence work.
Okay, a question about lady at the back.
I wanted to ask about how many horses did it take and how many horse trainers to make it all work out?
One main horse trainer, Bobby Lovegren, and he had a staff of beautiful horse whisperers that worked with him from Spain and Australia and the UK and America.
And Ireland.
There were 8 horses, but really principally only 2 horses that I worked with all the time, Abraham and Finder, and they played the main joeys. Other horses were specialty horses that knew how to run without a rider. Horses that knew how to back out. There were certain horses that were trained just to do one performance moment, but I pretty much always see Joey as essentially one horse. Of course, I hope you see Joey as one horse. That's the idea of movies. But I really see Joey as 2 horses. The 2 horses I worked with the most. The ones that gave me the most improvisation in the movie.
It takes about 45 minutes in makeup,
Yeah, I think so. So a little bit longer than the actors.
Well, the equine department was always arriving first and leaving last. I mean, all those people had to get there at 3 or 4 in the morning to get the horses ready.
Big question for
Questions, Mr. Spielberg. So throughout your wonderful career, what do you think? Could you tell us what your turning point was, and also the reason why you could continue what you love as a career for so long? And also, we in Japan are going through a very difficult time at the moment, and the earthquake and the nuclear crisis. It's almost as though people all over the world are at the forefront of the war with a tremendous sense of fear. What do you think the most important thing is in this trying time?
Well, the most important thing in any trying time is never give up hope and never give up, the recovery of your spirit and the recovery of your hopes for the future. That's once you give up hope, you give up your soul. So I certainly always encourage anybody who undergoes any kind of a personal or communal disaster that's the first thing they must never give up. The turning point in my career was Jaws. And it was a turning point because I was a director for hire before Jaws, and after Jaws it was such a big hit. I could do any movie I wanted, and Hollywood just wrote me a check. And I wanted to do this crazy movie about flying saucers, and nobody wanted to make it before Jaws, and I tried to get people to make this crazy movie about flying saucers. Kept saying, oh, this big mothership comes down to the end, you're going to love it, and this guy goes off and climbs into the mothership, and people thought I was crazy. And they wouldn't give me the time of day. The second Jaws was a hit. Everybody said, what about that mothership movie you had? What about that flying saucer movie? You still want to make that? So I mean, Jaws really was the turning point.
Okay, a question there, then one very back. Sir? Yeah. Also one to, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah.
Can I just ask Steve something about the young actor who you chose to take this part, this very important part, and what made Jeremy Irvin stand out? Presumably you looked at lots of potential.
Hundreds. I looked at hundreds of potential Alberts. And what made Jeremy stand out was just that ineffable quality that certain stars have or certain exceptional people have that just stand out and rise above the rest. And I looked at hundreds of very interesting actors and newcomers, mainly newcomers, and nobody had the heart or the spirit or the communication skills that Jeremy had, even in silence, even without speaking, even in his crude videotape test that we did through our casting director here in London, Gina J. Jeremy, every time I saw him on, he tested 5 times. He just got better and better and better. And I'm very accustomed to working with actors who have no experience. I mean, you can just look back at E.T. with my kids in E.T. and Drew Barrymore and Christian Bale from Empire of the Sun, who never made a movie before, very similar to the history and career that I think Jeremy could be, that could be in store for Jeremy. So I really trust the authenticity of real people, and my job is to get them to be themselves in front of the camera. Often what happens is you get a newcomer in front of the camera and they freeze up, or they imitate actors and other performances that they've admired, and they stop becoming themselves. And so my job as the director is just to always return them to what I first saw in them, which was simply an uncensored human being. And I don't want Jeremy to be a character actor. I didn't want Jeremy to be somebody he wasn't. I simply wanted him to be the person that he is today, and he did a wonderful job playing himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Spielberg, your film is gloriously old-fashioned, and I mean that's a compliment. And I wondered, in the making of the movie, whether you were dipping into childhood memories of heroes like John Ford.
Yes, of course. John Ford, Howard Hawks, Raoul Walsh, David Lean, just Louis Milestone, Victor Fleming, Michael Curtiz, my heroes. Many more than that, too. It goes beyond just American directors. But what I was looking to do, and I think part of it was the inspiration of your country. This could only have been shot in England. This is a British film. This is the most British film I've ever made. I once thought Empire of the Sun was a British film, but it was, I think I disqualified that after I heard the reaction last night at the Odeon in Leicester Square and realized I had made my first British film with Warhorse, through and through. And yet at the same time, you know, the works of John Ford, How Green Was My Valley, The Quiet Man, very evocative. You know, he painted beautiful landscapes, and he included the land as part of his storytelling. And how could you not include Devon and Dartmoor, and how could you not include Luton Hoo or the Duke of Wellington estate, where he shot so much of the picture? The land sort of was a character, and in a sense, that's what a lot of the old directors did. They went and they just featured the land they were standing on. It's kind of fun when you get to put a wide-angle lens on and not just shoot close-ups for an entire movie.
Gentlemen, that's good. Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Spielberg, you call this a story of love, but it's also a story of war. Why do you keep going back to those?
Well, I don't often mix my metaphors, so this is what makes this unique. Is this is a story of love and a story of war. But I don't see this really as a war story. This isn't not Saving Private Ryan. This isn't Band of Brothers. This isn't, you know, a typical war film. If you really look at the movie, there's only about 12 to 15 minutes of combat in this film, from the cavalry charge to the fighting in the Somme. You know, this is not really that kind of a film. I wanted families to see this picture together. There's hardly any blood in this movie at all. You know, unlike Saving Private Ryan, where I was trying to equip the actual testimonies of the young men that fought in France on D-Day, and I was trying to make the movie as brutally authentic as I possibly could. I took a different approach to this story. So for me, it's a combination of both.
Okay, in terms of the war, it does have a sort of has things to say about sort of courage in combat and tenacity in combat, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But you know, courage in combat is really, I mean, Albert shows tremendous courage in pressing forward on the Somme when he crosses no man's land, you know. And it's almost blind fear that makes him race forward. And that so often happens, but he also has a reason to be racing forward, you know. He has a goal in his heart of a horse he's hoping to find amongst the millions of horses in France. He actually is audacious enough to think he may find the one. And in fact, it seems that the one finds him instead.
Okay. Question in the middle there. Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Spielberg.
Hello.
Even if you said not a movie of war especially, you have this special regard about history, and this is something in a lot of your movies. Why do you think you have this regard to history, and would you say your regard to history is also an American regard on history?
Well, I think my regard for history is more of a European regard for history, since the Europeans are closer to history than we Americans are. You know, the social media has taken over America to such an extent that even to get my own kids to look back a week in their past is a miracle, you know, let alone 100 years. You know, Europe is closer, I think, to your history, and I think in that sense I have more proximity with the Europeans in that way. I love history. It was the only thing I did well at in school. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit I was not a good student, but I was great at history. My dad fought in World War II. He's turning 95 this month. He's you know, he was based in Karachi, which is now Pakistan, and he fought in Burma against the Japanese, and he told me his war stories, so I grew up hearing his war stories, and so that part of history was always, my first 8mm movies when I was 13, 14, 15 years old, most of them were war movies, World War II movies. So I can't shake it. Also, war, you know, throws characters into, you know, chaos, and there's no better way to test who a person is than put him in the middle of a war. And that's really going to show you what kind of a character you're telling a story about.
Okay, yeah, at the lady back there. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Spielberg, I suppose that make one film with horses is very challenging, very difficult, because obviously you never know how the animal is going to react. Could you tell us which shot was the more difficult? Because I found the shot where the animal is trapped and two soldiers on the both sides is incredible, but I don't know if it was the more difficult. If it's not, could you tell us which shot was more difficult in the film?
Well, the most difficult shots in the entire film is the shots where the Geordie soldier and the German soldier are trying to free Joey, because it is very, very hard to get a horse to be in that position on the ground. You can get a horse to lie down, but it's very hard to get a horse to kneel down on its forelegs and its back legs in that position. It wants to get right up. And so we had very, very little time to get those shots and to have the actors performing their best, giving me their best takes, while Joey patiently waited the 15, 20 seconds it took before Joey naturally wanted to get up. And anytime Joey wanted to get up, he was allowed to get up. It's not like he was tied to the ground. He was allowed to get up. So the trainers kept him down, and it was very, very difficult to get him to stay down.
It was very quiet the whole time we were shooting that.
Yeah.
Nobody moved a muscle.
Nobody moved. The crew didn't move.
Okay, we've got about 5 minutes, so let's get on there.
Oh, that's not enough.
Yeah.
Morning, folks. Kathy, I asked you these questions yesterday,
Yes,
so
yeah.
Stephen, I'll direct them towards you. Firstly, what is your decision process when choosing a script? Because your portfolio of movies is so diverse. And then secondly, your next movie, Lincoln, I'm wondering what was it like working with Daniel Day-Lewis and how he's shaping up as the president?
Well, first of all, let me answer your second question first by saying that I'm not saying anything about Lincoln yet, because I'm still in process on the movie, and I never speak about movies while I'm actually in the middle of making them. But how I choose my movies, they choose me. I mean, that sounds glib, but it's true. I don't go through a torturous intellectual process to decide what to direct. I know what I want to direct the second I read something or hear a story. I just know when it grabs me in a certain way, I want to direct it. And then I spend the next, 4 to 6 months trying to talk myself out of it. Because directing is really hard.
It's always an interesting thing because he's trying to get out of it and I'm trying to make it.
That's right. Kathy just knows how to start spending money to trap me. She entraps me in these productions. She knows I want to make it, but she starts spending the money, so I wind up having to direct it. But yeah, it's true. I know that essentially, when and what I want to do next. It's an undeniable feeling I get, and it's not the same feeling I get when I wind up producing something,
Okay.
as opposed to directing.
We'll go the lady there and the gentleman there. Yep.
Stephen, Hugh Jackman talked recently about the fact that nobody in your business is able to escape the ups and downs. I wondered what's been your experience of any perceived downs in your own career?
Well, I think the perceived downs of my own career is just managing my time and not feeling that I have enough time for my family or my friends, and it's really, and you have to make that, you can put that in the personal life category, but it's all one category because I've got to balance my family. I have 7 children. Some of them are in college, some of them graduated, some of them are not yet in college, and the downs in my life is when my career gets me in a chokehold to the point that I can't essentially see one of my kids' soccer games, or I can't go to one of my daughter's horse shows, and that really depresses me. That's a horrible time when that happens. It usually happens when I'm away and I can't physically get there because I'm in the process of shooting a movie. But those are the real downs. Everything else you just have to take with a grain of salt. A movie does well, doesn't do as well as you'd hope. Some movies get great reviews, some movies don't. That's just part of what I do for a living, what we do for a living. We just move through all that. That doesn't ever stop us.
Yeah.
Hi, Stephen. I'm glad that you talked about your children because I'm going to ask you. You have 7 children,
Yeah.
of course. And how much do you think of them when you're choosing projects because of your themes that are oriented for family? And also, I would like to ask you, as you work so hard and you have a lot of projects, are you willing to work as late as the famous Portuguese director Manuel de Oliveira, which is 103 and working steadily?
Oh, good for him. Well,
Oh God, that actually makes me tired.
Yeah, me too. Well, I have no plans to quit. I've always said Clint Eastwood is one of my best friends, and I've known Clint for 40 years, and we have a great, almost a joking relationship about retirement. And Clint's like 81 now, and I always say, okay, Clint, are you ready to retire this year? He says, no, are you? I say, no. I'm waiting for the phone call where Clint says he's hanging up his spurs. That's never going to happen. If it doesn't happen for Clint, it won't happen for me. But I have 7 children, and my daughter Destry had a lot to do with me directing Warhorse because she's been competitively writing. She's 15 now, and she's been competitively writing for, I'd say, 11 years. And we live with horses. We have 10 horses at home. And we've been living with horses for almost 18 years. My wife rides dressage, And that's another reason to qualify me to direct War Horse, because I know horses that way. I don't ride, but I certainly know how to muck a stable. And I really think that Destry, when she heard that Kathy had found this book and this play, and I was about to go to London to see the play for the first time, even before I saw the play and came back to report that it made me cry, and I loved it so much, my daughter said, "You have to make War Horse. You have to make it for me." So I did.
Question there, and then the lady in the red there.
Yes, hello, this is Yanis from
Who's
Greece.
speaking? Oh, right there. Thank you.
Would you say in a more philosophical way that the horse in the film represents us, I mean common men, because we see how the horse suffers through all this, and ultimately it survives.
Yeah, you've asked a wonderful question, because it's something that I have thought about and talked about, and it's been, it's been part of my thematic raison d'etre for being involved in War Horse. And you almost said what I have been saying over the last 2 years, and that is that Joey represents common sense. That if more people had the common horse sense of Joey, we wouldn't be having wars. And that was sort of a real underpinning for this entire endeavor. Good question.
When most people think about the sacrifices, particularly from the First World War, they think about human sacrifice. And in the movie, you certainly don't shy away from portraying how the animals suffered, as well with their deterioration of health and all that. I wonder how you actually managed to do that without obviously harming any animals. And I also wonder how much you expect that the movie will focus the public attention on those who are currently serving on the front line alongside animals at the moment.
Well, I certainly think that, nothing was ever done to the horses to put them under any stress. That was very, very important to all of us. But the important thing was, it was more important to Bobby Lovegren, who trained the horses. He was the one that guarded the horses, kept them safe, protected. When I had a crazy idea, he either said, "I think I can do that safely," or he said, "I can't do that safely." Then we had Barbara from the Humane Society. She was here, right, every single
day.
shooting day. When I first met Barbara, I said, "You've got the power over me." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "If you ever see an animal under any kind of duress, you can say cut." And I gave her the chance to stop a take, or even stop a take from even being taken. And so we had tremendous cooperation.
Yeah.
from
The
Humane
interesting
Society.
thing is, most of the trainers bring their own horses. They own them. So they're incredibly attached to them. And so that conversation becomes extremely personal. They know what each of their individual animals are capable of. And so that becomes a part of the conversation as well.
But you have to understand that, these horses were really smart. People don't give horses enough credit for being so smart. Topthorn was trained to simply, and so was Joey at a certain point in the story, trained to walk with their head down, which makes them look very ill. And, they didn't have to put weights around their necks. They didn't have to do anything like that. They were just trained to walk with their heads down.
How important do you think it is sort of for the audience to realise that there are, animals sort of out of Afghanistan, at the moment, sort of watching the as well?
I hope it raises awareness of the contribution animals make, not just to the soldiers fighting currently in Afghanistan, but police who use police dogs, the canine units in America and other countries. How interwoven the animal kingdom is with the human world, and how dependent, in a sense, we are on them.
Okay, and last question to the gentleman there.
Question to Mr. Spielberg. The music is a big part of the film. Can you just give a flavour of the day-to-day involvement with John Williams, the composer?
Well, John and I have had a 40-year relationship this year. This is our 40th anniversary of working together. We started working together in 1972 on Sugar Line Express, so this is year 40. And we start our next score in about 3 months. Johnny scores Lincoln in 3 months, and that'll be God, I don't know how many movies we made together, a lot. John is the most important collaborator I ever had in my career. He's made me look good. He's made my films look better. I get a lot of credit that really should be going to John. But I've kept the people who have been in my career, who I feel, or my family. Kathy has been with me since 1978. Janusz Kaminski, my cinematographer, has made every movie with me since Schindler's List. Michael Kahn has cut every motion picture I've directed since 1976 when we made Close Encounters together. Rick Carter has done 15 of my directed films as a production designer. I really believe in the family of collaboration, and so Johnny is certainly no less or no more important than the entire group of all of us, but Johnny does make a contribution that goes right to your heart. A lot of the contributions of my other collaborators are subliminal. You don't really single them out for credit, although without them, the film wouldn't have the impact, some of the films wouldn't have the impact that they have, but John certainly has the most considerable impact because his music immediately bypasses the brain and goes right to your heart. And that's the way it's always been with him. He's an amazing talent.
Right, one super quick question down here.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned using newcomers in the film, and you're using two Danish actors, Nicholas Bro and David Bensick. And obviously for them coming from a small country, it's a huge opportunity to work with names like the two of you. I was wondering if you would tell me what made you choose them, and what advice do you have to all the other actors who are from small countries but dreaming about making it big?
Suzanne Beers helped me to cast Nicholas. You know, she made a movie for DreamWorks not too long ago, Things We Lost in the Fire, about 3 years ago. And she brought my attention to Nicholas. And you know, the other actors, I remember the wonderful movie The Reader, you know, that he was in.
Yeah, with David Cross.
With David Cross, yeah. And so I see a lot of movies. And if there's an actor that distinguishes him or herself, I write their names down. I look for the end credits and I find out who is who, and if I can't find them, I look the next day when I get into the office. I watch a lot of television. I see a lot of shows from overseas because, you know, so many shows. We have like 600 channels of television in America. We need every country to supply those channels with good content. And I watch a lot of TV, and so I've got a big casting list.
So how did he distinguish himself? What do you think what did you like about him?
Sorry, you have to move on, sorry.
That was the question, sorry.
Oh, what I liked about them was what you liked about them. They're fine actors, and they were right for those parts.
I thought in a limited amount of time, Nicholas brought such heart to that relationship, and the fact that he, I assume everybody knows the part he played, but he's the soldier that takes care of the horses just as Topthorn's dying. Yeah. And I thought he did an exceptional job.
Great. Well, guys, thank you so much. Please show your appreciation for Kathy Kennedy, Steven Spielberg.